This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Good morning, Dan, and in for Amy this morning is Scot Bertram. He is the general manager of WRFH, the radio station at Hillsdale College, where we are broadcasting live this morning. Happy to be comfortably ensconced in America's Mesopotamia, as I like to call it, the cradle of civilization here at Hillsdale, talking about guns and the spillover yet from the weekend's activities that were financed by the dark money that the left
That's right.
likes to decry, except when it's coming from celebrities or George Soros to fund their activities. And just the continued reaction and the piling on and the dispensing of people's rights so cavalierly. And look, there was a Fox News poll. Majority of Americans would essentially opt for security over freedom. That's a dangerous place to be when it comes to gun rights or any other rights. Oh, this was what was on display at a little forum that was hosted by Moms Demand Action. It's one of these kind of AstroTurf gun control groups of suburban women. A Democrat candidate for local sheriff down in Buncombe County, North Carolina, had this to say during his pandering to these women. This is Daryl Fisher, Democrat candidate for sheriff.
You've heard people say, "You'll have to pry my gun from my cold dead hands." Okay. Whenever you pass away, we'll come get it. I don't know. I'm just saying. Joking just a little bit there.
Yeah, just a little bit. For more on the topic and his reviews of what he saw this weekend and the rhetoric emanating from the kids who've been elevated to policymakers by Schumer and Pelosi and the left, we're pleased to be joined by John Lott, Jr., the president of the Crime Prevention Center, author of a number of books, including The War on Guns and More Guns, Less Crime. John, thanks so much for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me on.
So your response to the hundreds of thousands of people that showed up in D.C. to hear David Hogg and others vomit up, in some cases literally, their left-wing talking points on guns and where you think this debate is headed.
Well, I guess my concern is that a lot of the proposals that they have, at best, they'll do nothing. At worst, they'll make people less safe. So I don't really see this as a trade-off between safety and freedom that you were talking about. I see it as a situation where we may have less safety and less freedom. You go and you want to raise the age of people being able to have guns to 21. Well, obviously there was this horrible incident where a 19-year-old killed people, but the reaction, what is supposed to happen for a 20-year-old woman who's being stalked or threatened? There's no discussion about what the empirical evidence, what the academic research, which has looked at past times where we've increased the age that people could own guns. It hasn't worked out the way people who are advocating for those types of laws were hoping for. There's been evidence that when you've had those types of increases at the state level and other places, you've actually seen increases in crime rates because you're making it so that some people who would be vulnerable are no longer able to go and protect themselves. They want to go and have changes in background checks, but they don't deal with the fact that virtually everybody who gets stopped from background checks right now is what we call false positive. That when they say that there are 3 million people that have been stopped from buying guns, that they don't mention that virtually all of those are law-abiding citizens who simply had names similar to the people that we wanted to have stopped, and that it can cost thousands of dollars for these individuals to get it fixed. So you're stopping law-abiding citizens some of them who may need guns for self-protection. from being able to go and protect themselves. So it's just, there's a range of things there, but it's, it's one thing to want to try to just do something. It's another thing, though, to hope we can actually do something that's related to the problems that is motivating the change to begin with. So, I look at these things and I'm frustrated that there's no desire to go and get rid of these gun-free zones. I mean, the attack in Florida at the school was yet another example where attacks occurred where general citizens aren't allowed to have guns for protection. I mean, we have 18 states that allow teachers and staff to be able to go and carry permanent concealed handguns. And there's never been a mass public shooting in any of those places that allow teachers and staff to carry. It takes away their strategic advantages. I mean, Florida, in their bill, just cost $500 million a year to go and put one uniformed police officer in each public school in the state. Well, having one officer there, even if they're on the scene, as opposed to what happened in the Florida shooting, is like putting somebody there with a neon sign that says, "Shoot me first." They're continually singled out and shot at first because the killers know if they can kill the one person who's armed there, they'll have free reign to go and kill other people.
John Lott, it's Scot Bertram. I wanted to ask, in this environment we see all sorts of ideas resurface. There's an op-ed in the New York Times. I know Chris Hayes from MSNBC has picked up on this idea that we should roll back and allow lawsuits against gun makers when their guns are used in crimes. Why is that a bad idea?
Well, I mean, the whole point of those lawsuits originally by Chicago and other places was simply to go and have lots of lawsuits that would eventually bankrupt those producers. It's one thing to sue people for any cost that's associated with their product, but it seems like what you would want to have is some notion of the costs and benefits. Okay, bad things happen. It's kind of like with the increased age to 21. Something bad happened with a 19-year-old. Well, you want to compare that to the losses of safety that you might have by not allowing other people, like a young woman who's 20, to be able to go and protect herself at the same time. What's the net effect? But those lawsuits didn't try to look at the net effect on people's safety. They would just say, here's a cost. People should be reimbursed for this general cost that's here. And, if you have that, first of all, it would be with, they wanted to go after some product that they thought was politically weak, like guns, and then go after other products like cars or what have you. I mean, if you were to go and sue a car maker for every time that there was an accident that occurred, saying, well, they should be responsible for the cost of that accident, I mean, you would put most products out of business.
What about the idea advanced by David French and others, a conservative response to some of these problems, particularly the mass shooter issue, and that's the gun violence restraining order? The idea, and it wouldn't be one-sided. The target of a restraining order would have his opportunity to present his case in a court of law, but the idea of being able to essentially force somebody into court to have to make their case for legitimate reasons about mental health specifically. What about something like that as a tool?
Look, if you really believe somebody's a danger to others, and so you want to be able to go and prove to a court that this person's a danger to others, you should have the person involuntarily committed to some type of mental health facility. The notion that you're just going to say this person is legally barred from obtaining a weapon. They don't think people can illegally obtain a weapon. I mean, it's the same people that sell drugs are the same people that sell illegal guns. I mean, how difficult is it for somebody to go and obtain illegal drugs? the drug dealers have guns in order to protect themselves from somebody
Right.
taking their valuable property that they have, and so this notion that just, well, if I just say you can't legally obtain a weapon, if you really believe somebody's a danger, why would that be the only response that you would take on that?
What about what was included in the Fix NICS, the National Insta-Check System legislation, some more funding and so forth? You mentioned some of the problems with the background checks. Is anything that was advanced in the wake of Parkland going to improve the national background check system?
No, I don't think. I think I was very disappointed by the legislation that was bundled in with the omnibus spending bill. There was no desire to kind of fix some of the real problems with the background check system, and there's more than that in the bill. They also had this Stop School Violence Act, which puts up $75 million. But it was written by this group. Often legislation gets written by special interests. Well, it was written by this group called Sandy Hook Promise, which specifically tailored the legislation so that they would be the ones that would go and get the grants. And the thing is, the Sandy Hook Promise is a rabid anti-gun group. I've debated them several times, and you name it, from banning guns to other things, this group is in favor. And they essentially use their lectures that they give to teachers and students around the country to go and essentially try to convince people that guns should be banned. And I don't see any reason why taxpayer dollars should be given to such a obvious political group that's there under the pretense that they're helping you identify people who have a tendency for violence. I think people are going to regret a lot of the things that are in that bill.
He is John Lott, Jr., president of the Crime Prevention Research Center, the author of a number of books on the topic, The War on Guns and More Guns, Less Crime among them. John, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you.
And he joined us on the turnkey.pro answer line.
There's only one